And we are live.
Hi, well, good day, everyone. Welcome to the LGBTQIA plus Intersectional Task Force for the Human Rights Commission. We are here. So yeah, I'm a little bit behind, a little scattered. It's not like me, so pulling it together. We are joined by a number of special guests today, and so I think it would be a good idea, and I see some new faces as well. It would be a good idea to do introductions. Let's go ahead and have the task force members introduce themselves. So Tricarico, Byron, and Kathy, and then we can have the rest of our guests introduce themselves. I'm Mike Waters. I'm the chair of the LGBTQIA plus Intersectional Task Force, and my pronouns are they and them. I live in Ward 7. And I'll pass it to Tricarico.
Hi, I'm Tricarico. I'm a member and I live in Ward 2. My pronouns are they and them, and I'll pass it to Byron.
Hi, good evening, folks. My name is Byron Kimball, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm a sitting member of the LGBTQI task force, and I live in Ward 5. And I will pass it on to Kathy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kathy. I'm a member of the Human Rights Commission and a member of this task force. My pronouns are she and her. I live in South Salem. Should I just pick a name from what I see on the squares? I don't know who all is who here tonight.
That sounds great. That sounds great.
I see Robert.
Hey everybody, my name is Robert Chandler, pronouns he and him. I am the Assistant Public Works Director here in Salem, and I am the support guy for the subcommittee from the Salem Parks Recreation Advisory Committee. And I'll pass it over to Dylan.
Evening, everyone. I'm Dylan McDowell, he, him pronouns, and I'm chair of the Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. And I'll pass it over to Keith.
Hi, folks. I'm Keith Norris. I'm also from the Salem Parks and Rec subcommittee, pronouns he, him, and I'll pass it over to Woody.
Yeah, this is Woody Dukes, pronouns he, him. I'm on the Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Board also.
Alan, I think you're on mute.
As usual. My name is Alan Alexander, and I use he and him. And I'm also a member of the Parks and Rec board.
And let's see, Tony, could you introduce yourself? Oh, you're on mute, Tony.
I'm with you, Alan. Hi, everyone. My name is Tony Whitler. I'm a parks planner for the city of Salem. My pronouns are she, her, and happy to be here with you all tonight.
And I see we have a few folks that aren't on camera, Amelia, Mark, and Becky. Would any of you like to introduce yourselves this evening?
Hi, this is Amelia. I hope you can hear me. I'll go first. My name is Amelia Knight. My pronouns are she, her, and I was invited to this meeting by Gretchen Bennett.
Great, thank you. It's nice to have you here.
Hi, go ahead.
Go ahead, Becky.
Okay, hi, sorry, Marilyn. I'm Becky George. I'm a recreation supervisor at City of Salem, and my pronouns are she and her.
I'm Marilyn Daly Blair, and I'm the director of Center 50 Plus for the City of Salem, and my pronouns are she and her.
And thank you, Marilyn, for filling in for Gretchen tonight with our note-taking and administrative tasks. I see Mark Weinstein on the screen, and I wondered if you wanted to hear they or she. I don't know your pronouns, but if Mark wanted to introduce themselves.
Sure. My name is Mark Weinstein. I'm an assistant city attorney. I'm also the new legal advisor to the Salem Park and Recreation Advisory Board. And in that role, I'm also the legal advisor to this subcommittee, and that's why I'm here on this Zoom call.
Excellent. Well, it's so nice to see so many special guests here tonight to meet with us. We'll go through some of our administrative tasks on the agenda, and then we'll leave plenty of time to have the discussion with the Parks and Recreation folks that are here. So thank you so much for being here. Next item on our agenda is, do we have any public comment this evening? Any members of the public? I don't think we had any submitted. Did we, Marilyn?
No, we did not.
All right, going once on public comment. All right, great. I believe we have quorum for approval of minutes with the four of us task force members who are here. Would anybody, did everyone get a chance to look at the minutes that Gretchen sent out, and would anybody like to move to approve those?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Awesome. All those in favor?
Aye.
I see the ayes. Okay, excellent. Minutes are approved. And that takes us to our first agenda item, which is our visitors from the Parks and Recreation Department. We Citizen Task Force as well. We have been in discussions for some months on this task force about creating a safe spaces project for the city of Salem. And our initial look at this project was actually a voluntary project for the businesses of Salem, where they could opt in and participate as safe spaces. And we got some feedback a few meetings ago from a community member who said, one of the made a really good point, which is that one of the most important things is that our spaces within the city are considered safe spaces. And so that got us talking about how we could partner with our Parks Department to have some visible representation of how Salem is embracing making the city safer for all. So that was really the impetus of this discussion, and I don't have a particular format or agenda in mind for how the discussion goes tonight, but I'm just so grateful that you're here and would love to hear any of your thoughts about participation in our Safe Spaces program and how we might visibly represent that our parks are safe for all.
Thank you, Mike. I'm happy to chime in as the chair of the subcommittee. Robert asked me to just say a few things at the start here to kick it off from our perspective, if that's all right.
Yeah, sounds great.
Well, once again, thank you for having us, and really excited for this conversation tonight. We are a subcommittee that was created. We were created really in response to a request from City Council looking at park permitting and usage and how we could make that more equitable, diverse, and thinking about inclusivity as well. And so trying to think about some of the city codes and policies and what are things that we can do and we can recommend and return a report to council to actually make some changes. I think the last year, there have been a lot of cases, then we've heard a lot of stories about people having concerns about this aspect in particular. So trying to see what are things that we can do ourselves and ways that we can learn from others. So we're really excited to be here tonight to really listen to you and to hear what your input is and testimony you've heard from the public in your own communities. We did send out a memo ahead of time. I believe Robert passed it along, and just a few guiding questions that I'll just read now if it's all right, just to kind of frame some of the work we're doing. And I'll also mention we've been, the four of us on the subcommittee have been reading through city code and getting familiar with what all the different protocols are and regulations, and also looking at other cities for inspiration to see how they're handling some of these issues and trying to learn what are the best practices, what are some of the lessons learned in other areas. So a couple questions that we're hoping to talk about tonight. And I think, as you mentioned, Mike, we can keep it as an open dialogue and a learning experience for everyone, which is wonderful. One question is, in your experience, to what degree do you find the park policies and permitting practices are balanced and fair to all persons within Salem? Another question is, have you witnessed or been told of someone experiencing prejudice or discrimination when reserving a facility or scheduling an event at one of our parks? And finally, with regard to park event permitting and policy practices for the purposes of the SPRAB subcommittee, what do you believe the city can do better to meet the needs of the LGBTQIA plus community? So those are all fairly broad, but I think that hopefully that can help narrow our conversation to start, and we can see where it takes it from there.
Thank you very much for those questions. You know, we hadn't really engaged in much dialogue within this team about permitting as a specific issue because this came up in the context of our Safe Spaces project. But I do know there have been questions about permitting over the last year, and I would invite maybe some of our committee members who are more experienced in this area to chime in if they have experiences or know of discussions that have taken place around permitting in particular. Wow, we're a quiet group tonight.
Mike, if I may, perhaps we could just broaden it to start then and say, what are some of the experiences are there experiences that any of you have heard about where citizens of Salem feel unsafe using the parks in certain circumstances, and what were those instances? And then maybe that can help us then look at some of the permitting aspects that led to that in a case. And so really, as we said, really wanted to hear from a wide range. And so I think that might be a better context to start, and then opposed to asking you to cite specific city codes.
Yeah, sounds great. I see a hand up from Amelia.
Hi. I had an experience. I went to the Human Rights Commission, I think 2 weeks ago, and tried to talk about it, but it was still a little upsetting. So my family recently had issues in Secor Park, where we live by. My wife and I were harassed with our disabled son, and that's why I wanted to be part of this meeting. I wanted to see if I could help in any way to stop homophobia in my neighborhood.
Thank you, Amelia. It was I'm glad to see you back from your last visit. And I don't think that your experience is solitary or particularly uncommon. When we started this discussion with the community member who visited, he indicated concerns, about experiences he had heard about at parks as well.
Yeah, I don't know how much you want to know about it, but we were walking our son to a play date to the park, and a group of teenagers confronted my wife and son and I, friend from our son, and yelled homophobic slurs at both of us, and then followed us through the little forested area to the playground. So I called the police and I notified the principal of the nearby school. And I'm seeing what else I can do.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
May I ask a follow-up question, Mike?
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm very sorry to hear about that experience, and really appreciate you sharing it with us. Would you tell us how it responded? One of the concerns that came up, or one of the questions we've talked about, is police involvement and recognizing that sometimes there's conflict or in terms of what the city can do and what the police can do, and that overlap. And so I'm just curious, as we're trying to get a holistic picture of how the city can better respond to these, what was the police response in that case?
They told me it wasn't a hate crime because we weren't physically attacked. So there was, they couldn't do anything about it. And they didn't call me back until an hour later also, which was disappointing. I actually found out about this commission through Facebook because I was reading, it was after a couple incidences of homophobia in my neighborhood that I finally reached out to Facebook and said, like, what can I do? Because I didn't feel like the police weren't helping. They trivialized our experience, which was very frightening for all of us, including my 6-year-old son.
Yes. Alan, you're on mute.
Amelia, my name is Alan Alexander. I'm also the chair of the Sunny Slope Neighborhood Association, and Secor Park is one of our parks. Would you mind if I shared this with our neighborhood association at our next meeting, which will be in July?
I would not mind. Would you mind me joining that meeting?
You're more than welcome.
Thank
The third Thursday of the month at 7 o'clock.
I'll be there. I can send you my address or phone
Well,
number.
we're still meeting on Zoom, but if you go to the city webpage and look under Sunny Slope, it'll give you the link as well as all the other information about it.
Thank you.
I see a hand from Woodrow. You're on mute.
I taught him that.
Yes. I wanted to ask Amelia, did you call the 911 or did you call the non-emergency number? Just out of curiosity.
I called the non-emergency number.
I guess a question I would have is, in an incident like Amelia's or others that had happened, is there information or even personnel available as part of the parks program that can respond to incidents like this? You know, what are the alternatives if police is not always an option? And where would people even find that information would be my question.
I think to kind of pile onto that, and sorry I didn't give you a chance to respond to Tricarico's question, but one of the things we talked about with the Safe Spaces program was having posted information in the parks. Is there any kind of posted information in the parks for somebody who's experiencing a concern in the parks, whether it's a concern of this nature or just a criminal concern at the time, but not to co-opt Tricarico's question. Apologize for that.
Tony, do you think you could respond to that? I'm trying to think beyond signs about just contacting police. I don't know if there's anything specific beyond that I know of.
I don't think in every park there is something, and actually Becky, I believe at Minnow Brown, we have some signage. Isn't there, Becky, where people can contact, maybe it's the dispatch number, if there's something going on, but I don't know if that's in every park now. I'd have to check and get back to them.
Yeah, it looks like Robert was gonna respond, but there is a Public Works dispatch number. But Robert, do you want to chime in?
Yes, to answer Tricarico's question directly, no. There really is no other resource, for instance, that was, that Amelia shared or similar ones. There is a Public Works 24/7 dispatch phone number that you could call, but I look at the dispatch log almost every day, and we get calls along the lines of something wrong in the park, whether it's dogs off leash or all the different things. It is typically referred to the police non-emergency number because our public park staff aren't in a position to really enforce things like that. So police non-emergency was the right move. Well, I've got the speaking mouse. Can your Safe Spaces project, does that have overlap into signage and other resources that could be put into our parks?
That's one of the things that we've talked about. When we started talking about this, it was really aimed at businesses and particularly allowing businesses to self-identify that they are safe spaces. And what that does is if a person is experiencing something traumatic like what Amelia has described, they would know from a decal that's at the business that business was a safe place to walk into. And we would provide the business owners and their staff at those operations with resources that would help them understand what to do if they, for example, witnessed a hate crime, if they had someone coming into them needing support and needing to get in touch with an organization like HRC. The business would be sort of preloaded with those resources. They would have those available. It was the community member who came a few meetings ago who really got us to think more broadly about it and think about the public spaces and whether the same thing. And I don't think it's just the parks. I think it's the parks, the library, any space that's owned by the city. Centers 50 plus, Marilyn, since you're on the line. Any space that's owned by the city should we think, probably signal to members of the city that it's a safe space and that there are places for them to call if they're experiencing an issue. I do wonder, in Amelia's particular case, if there had been a sign that encouraged you, if you're in a situation like that, to call the non-emergency number or whatever number it was, or 911 in a real emergency, if the level of threat is very high. If that might have at least alleviated some of the discomfort. I don't know, Amelia, and not to put you on the spot, but in that moment, what would have helped most in the moment you were experiencing it, in addition to perhaps getting a more speedy response from the police? Is there anything within the park itself that would have helped you feel a little bit more safe or prepared or knowing what to do?
I don't have a good answer for that, which is why I'm here, I think, because before these incidences recently, we felt very safe in our neighborhood, and we're in the park all the time. So I don't have a good answer to that. I'm sorry. I'll try to think of some creative solutions besides this. This was my best idea.
I think this was the right idea, though, and I don't mean to put you in a position of having to describe what would have made something terrible better, because it's certainly not that kind of thing. But I do think that some visibility within the park so that people knew what to do in these situations might be helpful. But I'm curious what our other task force members are thinking of the discussion, and if they have any input, particularly Kathy and Byron. Do you have any thoughts about the discussion so far, and what types of things we might want to be working on with our guests here tonight?
Wait, the question about signage, I wonder if there couldn't be some sort of a sign to indicate to people, number one, that you're welcome and safe here, and number two, that don't, for the perpetrators, that sort of behavior is not okay, and so that people know coming in that this is going to be a safe space for people, and if there's a problem, we're going to do something about it. I know that the sign itself is not going to be able to stop that behavior, but it might indicate that we're trying.
Would the sign have any information? Like I talked to Gretchen, she gave me a hotline that I could call to report incidences.
I think it could.
Yeah,
I think it should. There should be some kind of way to contact somebody, even if it's just, if it's not actual physical intimidation. There needs to be some kind of speedy information available for help.
Amelia, I think that's a great idea. And one thing I would say is you mentioned having to find the information on Facebook to find next steps. And I think that that's clearly a missing link right there, is that, you know, having to go to Facebook to find the information is usually not what we're trying to encourage in terms of finding city resources. So it's, I think this, I know with your story has become the case study of tonight, but I think there's just a lot of really valuable ways that we can work with this and try and make sure that this doesn't happen again. And we can use this as a learning moment for the city. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Alan, I see your hand.
I don't think it would solve the problem. We had one experience in Sunny Slope Park. It had to do with some unruly teenagers who were right on the cusp of vandalizing some of the features there. What I did was just ask them to stop, and they refused. So I took out my cell phone and took pictures of all of them. That had a cooling effect, and they left. I'm not too sure how often that worked, but it worked that one occasion.
I think that's a really interesting point, Alan. The one side point to that is that, and not to put you on the spot, but you're a white older male, and I think that there is a sense of when someone pulls out their cell phone, that can actually sometimes escalate violence if violence is going to happen. And so that's definitely something that a lot of people have learned in recent years, to be able to pull out a phone and take photos, but there's a risk to that, to the individual who's experiencing it, which is that violence could escalate.
Oh, I certainly understand. It's just something that seemed to, they obviously didn't want their picture taken.
Yeah.
There were three of them and one of me, and you're right, I am old. And so there was nothing ever physical, but they were just, just some arrogant youth. And, but they, that seemed to change the tone for a moment, and they left.
I saw Amelia's hand up and Byron's. Amelia, did you have a thought about that?
I did. That's something that my wife and I discussed, because we were thinking like preventative means of protecting our family. But that only works if like one of us stays and films whoever is threatening us, and the other person takes our child. Like it's not a win-win situation for a family event. Yeah. And so like I just wanted to add on to that, that we talked about that, and because like I'm white, I would stay and film. She's not, she would leave with her child. But I don't, it's an idea. It's one we're going to use in the future, and I'm open to any more safety measures that we could use.
Byron.
Thank you, Mike. This is something, and I don't want to like seem as if I'm like derailing the conversation, but I'm curious if this is something that the Parks Department can speak on. But is there potential for capacity to respond to instances like these without necessarily involving or going beyond the police? Because as we've sort of talked about, it does seem that in responding to these instances, the available option is to refer folks to non-emergency lines, where we find that members of our police department may not take action on instances, even if our community members are feeling threatened while using public accommodations. And so is there dialogue that we can open up or discuss ways to confront instances like these in the future?
I would defer to Robert on that one, most likely.
Yeah, I could tell, you got everyone's face, they're all scanning, waiting, who's going to unmute next, kind of thing. So, as a good point, I think it's out of the, outside of the charter of the subcommittee from the Parks Board that's here. But, Mark, I think there is value in bringing a representative from the Salem Police Department, if you haven't already done so, to talk about this, because there's a partnership in how you respond. And, a quick police presence can sometimes calm the situation, sometimes make things worse. It's a hard call. So what as we're here looking at, our little box policies, permitting, making sure our spaces have the atmosphere, if not, in fact, a sense of being welcome to all, which is the purpose of public spaces. What can we do to enhance that? I really like the idea. I mean, I'll speak for me, some signage or hotline numbers, things that give resources to varying degrees. That's very helpful. But some of the other ones, it blends into some of our other departments that would be happy to come talk to you. Does that make sense, Byron? I'm sorry.
It does. Thank you.
One other thing we talked about in that brainstorming meeting with the community member who came in was thinking about having HRC presence occasionally at our parks, whether it's setting up a booth on busy summer days. Probably not this weekend, it's going to be blazing hot, but setting up a booth occasionally on very busy park days to increase visibility of our resource. I think, reflecting on Amelia's story and what we've been talking about tonight, and what you just said, Robert, which is that sometimes police presence can escalate a situation of concern. And if we can bring other resources to bear and have that visibility within the parks, it may help us shift the environment to the kind of environment we want to see in our parks. Because you're absolutely right when you say that these areas of public accommodation should be for everyone. And clearly in the incident that we're discussing tonight, that wasn't the case. Dylan, you've had your hand up for a bit.
Thank you. Just a quick addition that I was just reminded of. There was the Senate bill in the Oregon legislature that just passed, SB 289, about bias crimes in state parks. I don't know if everyone here is familiar with that. There's not the chat, so I can't share it with folks, but the quick description summary is: prohibits persons convicted of a bias crime committed while on state waters or publicly owned outdoor recreation land from entering area under jurisdiction of state parks and recreation department. And so it adds a penalty aspect. I think one of it was something I followed a fair amount, and there are concerns about how much you can actually enforce it, but just having that enforcement mechanism has been an interesting part of the discussion, and having that on the books. So one of the things I have wondered about is if there could be a city version of that. And I wonder if that would then provide, it would tie into a state mechanism that already exists, but then it could provide a little bit more teeth for enforcement. But I throw it out there as an option, and would love feedback from all of you if that is something you've heard about, or if you know anything about, if there's potential downsides or risks to that I'm not aware of.
Any thoughts out there? Byron, I saw your hand was up briefly, but I didn't know if you had just accidentally clicked the button.
Well, Dylan actually already clarified my question, which was, should this pass, would it only apply to state parks versus county versus city, et cetera? So I think
that is my impression. Yeah, I believe it is just under the state parks and rec department.
And also to clarify on that, it's someone who's already been convicted of a bias crime, correct?
If someone is convicted, yes, then they have to be convicted of a bias crime, but then they can lose access to recreation waters, hunting license, access to parks, pet permits, things like that. So it's you do have to have they have to be convicted, but it does add that layer. I think is my understanding of it is it adds the layer that if you're convicted, then something actually happens beyond a slap on the wrist. But this is you can't use the parks anymore.
I mean, that's great, but when we look at Amelia's specific position, the police didn't take it seriously, and from my understanding, Amelia, really nothing came of that. So that essentially wouldn't prevent that from happening again. Because I don't want to be the rain on the parade here, because a lot of really good ideas coming out, but none of these ideas are going to protect Amelia and her family the next time they go to the park. And that's my number one concern right now. And I know that's a really big ask. I know that's probably not in the park's charter, right, to be out you know, keeping a presence at a park. But it is a real problem. This isn't the only incident. I've heard incidents of people, you know, open carrying and drinking at Bush Park, which is very close to my home and a huge concern for me. We've had in our HRC meetings recently other reports very similar to Amelia's experience. You know, she's not the only one experiencing that, and even if she was, it would be too many. So my real question is, what is the park going to actively do to actually prevent things like this from happening?
Thank you for that. And I would say that that is what we were trying to figure out, is how we can be more effective at that. And I think creating a safer space is part of that. And I think the one thing I would say to your comment, which I think is absolutely right, but my hope is that what we're hearing in some cases is that the police don't always have the ability to enforce certain things. And so I think ideally, if you had like a bias, because it sounds like Amelia, they said that if it was not physical, that they couldn't do anything. And so I'm wondering if something like this, or if there was a way to actually create a penalty for more of the verbal crimes. And I was trying to just quickly look up if they had a definition for bias crimes, and fortunately I cannot find that instantly. But I think those are the kind of things I'm wondering, is if we even have, as we look at things like city codes, are there even penalties for those kind of behavior, or is it mostly a slap on the wrist? And so trying to make sure that there is even something in place to punish that, where it's not a situation where you call and they say, well, I can't do anything. So that's part of where I'm trying to see if there are changes we can make and trying to adopt it with that, but fully understand that ideally it's about prevention and not about just reaction.
Amelia, I see your hands up.
If you do find any materials of laws or anything valid like that, it would be, I think, helpful to have on the sign the same verbiage. So when you call in, you can use the same language that the cop and the officers will be using to define what is happening to you. Because when you're going through an incident like that, it's traumatic, it's very emotional, it's hard to articulate what's happening to you. But if you use the same language that an officer understands, it would really help victims of any incidents or crimes.
Thank you so much. I wonder too, you know, as we talk about policies and laws, if other cities have, any other cities have paved the way in terms of helping with those bias incidents that traditionally haven't been thought of as crimes, but we can see from the conversation tonight that they're very traumatic, they're very scary, they're very unwelcoming in our parks, and they create an environment that feels very unsafe. And so I wonder, are there other cities that have adopted codes or passed laws that sort of broaden that definition of bias activity, or on the flip side, you know, I think a bias crime is in the eye of the beholder sometimes, and I think it's important that we have a definition that really meets the need of the moment. Do you all, as a parks board, and you know, ever do research into what other cities do, and do you know of any examples of cities that are doing this well?
I will just note that that is a big part of what we're trying to do, is look at other cities. So like, especially, you know, Portland and Eugene within the Valley, but also looking elsewhere. I know Woody had shared a resource from Ohio, from a city there that was working on different policies. And so we're actively trying to look at that, but I think I'll open it up to my fellow subcommittee members if they found anything, but I will just note that that is something we're trying to take to heart as well.
Woodrow, you're on mute. I think you're still on mute.
Sorry, I was looking at the city of Portland's prohibited conduct on their website. And I haven't been able to look all the way through it yet, but that might, there's some good information in there that might apply. I don't have time. I'm trying to look through it while I was paying attention here, so look into that one.
And I would just say we would invite all of you on the task force if there's cities that you've heard about that do this well, or if there's folks that you, friends from other parts of the country, or people that you work with that have heard of great cities that are very welcoming and inclusive, let us know. And even if it's just the city name, then we can dive a little bit deeper into the code.
I was also curious, both for preventing incidents and potentially for working with the Safe Spaces initiative. Is there a volunteer program where people are out in the park, you know, cleaning up or doing anything like that? Is that already in place with city parks?
Yes, different parks, a couple different, some groups, volunteer groups operate in different parks periodically. Friends of Pioneer Cemetery, for example. Some groups do service projects as needed, that picking back up again post-COVID. There is a parks patrol. I don't know exactly how it's made up, primarily at Mental Brown Island Park. There's always room for more. I'm looking at the rows. Tony, do you want to add any more to that?
Yes, well, Mental Brown Island Park and Bush's Pasture Park do have volunteer patrol groups. Our volunteer coordinator, Tibby Larson, she has connected with neighbors that live near all of our parks. We used to have a program, I thought it was called something like a Park Star, but we have people that keep eyes and ears on the parks. And I'm not sure where we're at this time on that program. I believe we do still have folks who are our eyes and ears. I would need to check with Tibby. That's not under my purview, but I'd be happy to check into that and provide details of the program.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that and look at how we could support expanding that program. And I also would wonder, you know, if, you know, what the training is for folks that are partaking, and if that includes like bystander intervention training, because like Mike brought up the excellent point of sometimes filming can escalate violence. So we really want anyone who would potentially be in a park to really have that training on how to really de-escalate a situation and really support someone who is experiencing a hate or bias incident in a way that's going to keep them safe and not make things worse, and also not endanger those park volunteers. But if that's not already included, that might be another area to look at, as well as part of the Safe Spaces program. You know, that could be a potential way that the, you know, city parks kind of expand that program on their own way of what their need is, right? Because it's really easy for us to ask a business that has staff when it's open to really be mindful of these things, but it's a lot harder when it's a park and it's, you know, a public open space. So I'm wondering what the potential is there to expand that program, and just make the parks physically safer for everyone who uses them.
Well, I was wondering too, if there was a way to connect, and this may not be on base at all, but through neighborhood watch programs that are near parks, neighborhoods that are part of that program and have a park in their vicinity. Like Secor is actually a good example, because the neighborhood just literally dumps right into the park. If there was a neighborhood watch program there, and maybe they receive some of that training. I don't know. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a really great suggestion, Tony, and it actually came up in an earlier meeting where we were talking about Safe Spaces project, due to our desire to be able to provide anyone who's performing that kind of that kind of volunteer work with the city with resources to understand our communities. One of the fears that we have around Neighborhood Watch is actually that Neighborhood Watch could be a place where bias exists. And you start to see things like racial profiling, for example, existing in a neighborhood because people just aren't trained sometimes. So we actually really like the idea of connecting up with the neighborhood watch groups that are here in Salem and providing them with the same resources that we're developing for the businesses that we would love to share with park volunteers as well, so that they have a deeper understanding of the communities that they're serving and the diversity of the communities that they're serving and some of the things that the communities experience that they can either improve through their work or sometimes make a little worse. So yeah, definitely we would love to have these resources that we're building be shared far and wide.
Well, and if I might add one more thing. Also, the police might know of these certain volunteers in neighborhoods who are supportive in the way that you are needing. And, I don't know, just build on that. I mean, they must know how these groups operate in the neighborhoods and the folks and where that bias lies, and then maybe focus education in that way. On those groups. I don't know.
I'm so appreciative of all the dialogue and suggestions tonight. And, our work is cut out for us. Clearly, when we have people in our community who are having such bad experiences in the park. So it's a good opportunity for us to show how Salem can be better and be more for the people that live here. We do have just a couple of other agenda items, but this is the richest discussion that we've had in a while, so I don't want to cut the discussion short. And the other agenda items are literally probably 2 minutes worth of stuff. But are there any closing thoughts, remarks, questions that we'd like to get to, be sure to get to tonight? Amelia.
Sorry that I took over your meeting, first of all. Second of all, I want to say thank you for letting me speak and share my experience. And please let me know how I can help you and your committee in any way possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amelia. And you did not at all hijack our meeting. I think that you actually made the meeting complete. And it means so much that you came tonight. So thank you. Dylan?
Thank you. I just want to quickly let you know about our timeline of what we're working on right now. And so we're in the process of doing this review, as we mentioned, looking at city code, looking at other cities. We're meeting with you all tonight. We're going to meet with the HRC Commission next month. And then we're hoping to have some recommendations put together by August is our current timeline. And then by September, have that be presented to council with some ideas of how they can start working on these topics. Obviously, there's a chance if we continue, we might push it back a month or so, depending on what we find. But we are going to have another public meeting as well next month. And so we're ironing out the final times for that. But we will keep you posted on this process and just encourage you, if you have additional thoughts after tonight, or if you hear about other things that cases like we heard tonight from Amelia, where there are some things that we should be thinking about very explicitly. We would love that and really appreciate that, so we can make sure that we are making this as impactful as possible. So thank you again for having us tonight and sharing all of your thoughts with us.
Thanks so much for being with us. Just a couple of other quick items. Of course, I have to click around to find my agenda. One moment. That I wanted to mention. One thing on the Safe Spaces project that I wanted to kind of check in with the committee about was that we did reach out to the Arts Commission, and they made a couple of suggestions that Gretchen sent to me over email, and I've asked to have a little more discussion with them. Some of their suggestions were kind of some of the things that we specifically said that we did not want to do, like a contest. And they suggested some local design agencies that I don't know if they were really looking at it from the equity lens that we wanted to look at and make sure that our communities are represented. So I wanted to have a little bit further discussion with them, but there might be an opportunity for members of the Art Commission to come and visit with us, similar to the parks tonight, to talk about that decal process and what that might look like. So more to come on that. Gretchen also wanted me to share that the Pride Proclamation that was signed by Mayor and City Council was sent out to our broad HRC email list last month, or I guess earlier this month. Just wanted the group here tonight to know that that went out to all the groups that are signed up to receive those HRC emails. And that was all I had in terms of additional content for tonight. Are there any member remarks and announcements?
I have nothing to add, no.
Well, again, many thanks to our parks representatives who came here tonight to hear us out. Special huge thanks to Amelia for providing us with that perspective, and to our members as well. We will take I say we'll take a break. A couple of us are going to move on to the awareness task force meeting, which is coming up in about 4 minutes. So I think we should go ahead and adjourn for tonight.
Thank you all very, very much.